look, I think there's no easy answer for that. It's all a trial and error, right? So the first opportunity or first job or whatever you do may not be what you want to do at the end of the day. But the fact is that's only a door, door opening, like foot in the door, right? You step out there, and then when you start exploring, that's when you realize. And again, once again, you guys have an advantage of having access to a lot of information right now in the world. I think the most important thing is to like go out and speak to people who do various things in life, or whatever you think you want to explore. Ask them what their job means, or what they do, or what it is, and that's the thing is critical. You have to have a personal input from people, and sitting out here or by yourself or using the internet is not good enough for you to get a feel for that. And this is basically where you should reach out, whether it's whether it's alumni or people otherwise that or through contacts, is if not anything else, just to understand as to what they do and how they do it and what is it that interests them and excites them. And that's important. That's part of the due diligence process that's required. And if it's not now, maybe through your internships or when you do your first role job or whatever it is that you do, I think all the time you basically need to like explore and figure out, because there's no rule, there's no guarantee that the first thing that you do is what you would like.
Good evening, sir. So I noted from your timeline that you had done an MBA from IIM Calcutta straight out of college.
Yeah.
I mean, this might be more of a personal question, but a lot of us have a dilemma whether this idea of doing an MBA straight out of college is a good one or not. So after having an experience in industry for almost 20 years, what would your advice be to the students here? That's my first question. And the second thing is, you might be aware of a trend that a lot of IITians are very keen on joining the financial markets after straight out of college, and they do not have a very good idea about what, I mean, to put it better, to structure it better, we do not have a very clear idea what skills are required in that field, and what do they need, what are the skills they need to focus at IIT to succeed in that. I mean, can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, look, on your first question, at the end of the day, let me tell you, at that point in time, like 20 odd years ago, in many ways, whether it was going to IIM or what, it was very much a filtering process of getting into a placement and a job pool or in professions more than anything else. So it was not a classic US style whereby you graduate, you work for a bit, and then you come back for an MBA having a better idea as to what the work environment is, and then to figure out. It was to a large extent very much, okay, if I want to like move into certain professional fields, whether it's marketing, whether it's consultancy, whether it's I think this is the easy way to get into that job pools. Right? At the end of the day, you're trying to target essentially that placement process at the end of 2 years. That really drove a lot of the decision making at that point in time. And in many ways, I don't know if it's very different even now as to if you look at the way placement processes work, and if you are Procter & Gamble, or if you are Hindustan Lever, or if you are or a bank or McKinsey, where do you go? Which campuses do you go to recruit? I mean, that becomes a much more of a determining factor than anything else. I think that's my take of it. But the reason whether you should go to an MBA soon after or IIT or not is basically depending on fundamentally, is engineering and the field that you want to work in is that's your passion, that's your interest, that's what you're keen on. And I think that's what I mean, unless you try that out, if you're interested, you'd never know. In many ways, you have to be absolutely clear in your mind, that you're actually not getting into engineering, you're getting into something absolutely different. And the MBA is the route to essentially change tracks. But these days, if you look at most of the IIMs, about 50-60% of them are with work experience, at least having worked 2-3 years. So that trend has changed over the last 20 years, where probably in my time, it was about 15-20% maximum had work experience, and it was much more of a change tracks rather than work, figure out, understand, and then make a decision. In terms of financial service sector, look, I think engineers in particular disproportionately apply to the industry because the standard stereotypical understanding is that I'm good at math, I'm good at analytical stuff, and hence I'll be good at banks and then banking industry. Unfortunately, that's that logic, and I can apply to every single industry, not necessarily finance alone. And I think what works for finance industry is equally applicable whether it's a marketing industry or consultancy. And a lot of the stuff that I was mentioning about are the key element really differentiates is still soft skills and the EQ element of it. The ability to communicate, to work in teams, be adaptable, flexible. I mean, they count for a lot more, and ability to network and connect with people. Willingness to have the willingness to step into situations where you need to provide leadership and you do not hesitate to do so. I mean, they are far more important, than. But again, as I said, I would say all these qualities apply to any other role, any other industry, any other job. It's nothing unique or specific about it. And if you look at typical bank recruitment programs, again, as I said, I've recruited heavily over the years for the banks. From UK, we recruit people who are from Oxford and Cambridge and various universities with bachelor's degrees in arts, sciences, not necessarily engineers. In fact, engineers are rare commodity. And we go to China, we get a whole variety of people, Korea. So it's basically the filtering system of India that's kind of funnels the engineers more towards the thing. But I would say in terms of skill sets, it's not any different from what would make you succeed in any other profession for the matter. Again, I would say like a lot of it is probably our stereotypes or like things that you may have heard from others. Look, most of the banking finance jobs are, you will realize, are fundamentally client sales oriented kind of roles, marketing roles. It's just that you're dealing with a different set of products, financial products instead of any other. And if you're in FMCG, you're dealing with consumer goods. So most of the financial industry roles and jobs are client-oriented, sales-oriented roles. And the things about doing tasks for and then over a few hours. I mean, that's a very much a niche kind of understanding which revolves around maybe investment banking analysts in certain divisions where you've probably heard or listened or discussed with people. But that's really not what it's all about. When you're an analyst, when you're starting off in any industry or any job whatsoever, you would be doing various roles and tasks as required. I mean, you're learning, picking up skills, but it's very much part of a team effort, and you're very much part of a team. And within finance industry itself, there are a variety of roles, right? A variety of jobs and variety of tasks. But almost all of them involve in some shape or form, working on transactions and deals, which are long gestation, takes many months to do, or something that's quick and fast, but always as part of teams. That's really the profile most of the time. There are very few roles where you can actually go off and do something on your own, and that may be in analytics or something that is in the technology side. That's basically it. The front end roles are always much broader. In many ways these days, India is what you do in India is on par, or it's not very different in terms of the kind of complexity or the challenge or the content of roles as abroad. The usual understanding is that if you're doing the job in New York or London, it's far more challenging or in depth or more glamorous. But the The fact is that every role, every country, every job comes with its own set of complexity. If all people are looking for complexity in terms of, and this is something that I get quite often, is I'm not working with something that's really complex models or numbers, or I'm not using my advanced analytical and mathematical skills. They're probably less than 0.1% of the jobs actually, or 1% of the jobs in the marketplace. The complexity varies from place to place. Like places like India, or if you go to China or you go to Korea, the complexity is more about the domestic market conditions, the rules and regulations, the financial infrastructure, and the needs of the clients, and how do you manage to solve them in a more constrained environment. And if you go to places like New York or London, it could be something like the very well developed markets, much more liquid, but the client challenges are a bit different, and you're trying to figure out as to how to solve for them. So every market is going challenges. It's about, are you willing to accept that there are multiple dimensions to complexity and not just one that you're comfortable with. That is, if I don't have a calculus equation to solve for, then it's not worth doing. But trying to figure out what is fairly complex from a regulatory environment perspective, and that involves multiple countries and jurisdictions and legal infrastructure, is that something interesting enough to work on? So so each I would say geography, role, responsibility has its own challenges, and I would rate the roles that my colleagues do in India as probably one of the more challenging ones within the bank, given the circumstances under which they do.
Sir, as per your timeline, like you have worked in many banks, I was curious to know, like how do you find the organization culture in all the banks, and what were your learnings from it, and how do you know exactly will the culture that you are getting into the organization, will it fit with you or not? Like, how do you, before joining the organization, how do you find out whether the culture will fit with you or not? Other than internship, like if you are not interning with the company, then how do you get to know about the culture of the?
Yeah, of course, the internship is the best way to know, but each organization is like an individual. Like it's quite unique. I mean, have their own culture. It's basically the way they work, and I can say, like from just if I just stick to the banks, JP Morgan, Deutsche, and Stanchart, all three very different banks and cultures altogether. JP Morgan was very at that point, when I worked, pre-mergers, etc., was a very blue-blooded, U.S. investment bank, took itself very seriously, prim and proper kind of a thing. Deutsche is very entrepreneurial kind of a culture. It had just, transformed itself in the mid-90s into investment bank. So it was, so you were very much part of the, growth process. So it was a very, can do, whatever it takes kind of environment. Stanchart, where I work, is a much more collegial, consensus-driven, a much more committee-based kind of a decision-making, much more of a team, driven kind of a bank, teamwork-driven bank. So they're all very different cultures, and I think it's important that one fits or enjoys, or it's never a perfect fit, but you need to feel comfortable and enjoy, the culture, for you to succeed. If you're not enjoying yourself and if you're not comfortable, you will be miserable. You will not succeed. That's given, and you better. And frankly, you will not know until you join for sure. But again, comes down to due diligence. You got to talk to people who work in the place, as to what it is, what it feels like. How do you do various things? How do you handle certain situations? How does the bank react to certain situations? I mean, that basically gives you a very good perspective. And again, there's no guarantee until you do join, but that part of due diligence is pretty critical. And if you speak to people who work in the organization long enough, you will have a very good idea. And the other aspect is people change too. You got to realize that you are not a constant. You are a variable yourself, and circumstances and time you adapt and you change the kind of person you are, and organizations too evolve and change. So sometimes there's a match and a meet as you go along, down the line. But if you're not enjoying yourself, I think you better off elsewhere.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, what is your opinion about the brain drain of IITians? People who study technology here, I mean, completely technical, and yes, they have their own interest. They go into different fields. But what is your opinion about those who go abroad, settle there, and then they don't come back or contribute to the country? What is your opinion?
Well, what's your practical suggestion? Right. That's there's an element of being pragmatic, and there's so I definitely fall in the camp of somebody who has studied in IIT and lives abroad now for 18 years now, and I'd like to think that in some shape or form I do contribute back to society and to the country. But I don't think there's any way you can stop it. Because that's a question that comes up quite often, and we've debated over our entire lives, I would say, since we joined IIT among friends. Is that 17 and 18 years old? What decision are you making? The decision to come to IIT is driven by a lot of other factors than what you're interested in many ways, right? And some of the case studies that I mentioned. Harish said, he'd love to have been an English professor or a writer, but he was good at maths too and physics too. So was Shri, and so in many ways, if you are good, if you are smart, and if you are capable of getting into IIT, you would choose to come into it because it provides a certain platform and certain an opportunity that you would not get otherwise, traditionally in India. But subsequent decisions as to what you do with your life, you cannot force that to be a function of the fact that you spent 4 years in IIT. I mean, that's not practical and that's not pragmatic. But frankly, these days, and many of my classmates who are in India, who stayed in India and are entrepreneurs and are working here, and they say the talent pool now is far more diverse. In fact, they preferred hiring from Stevens and some of the other colleges. Students that they find have full of enthusiastic, well-rounded, smart, curious, willing to take risks and chances. So I would say these days there are more options, and you don't have to only go to an IIT simply because you're good at academics. So those alternatives are there, and I think that's will probably help I would say diversify the options out there for students. But yeah, I have no answer to that, and I don't think you should prohibit or ban or do anything of the sort. It serves no purpose, and hopefully along the way, we all figure out our angle and our connectivity and serve in our own way.
Good evening, sir. So you spoke of having an alternate passion, which is really important for networking. So obviously, the early phase of career will be very challenging, especially in the financial market. Did you have time to pursue your alternate passion, and if so, what was it?
No, I don't think time was never the issue. I mean, it's all about inclination. I mean, I've come across really interesting people all my life who had things to do beyond their work or professional life. I don't think time is absolutely the wrong excuse. I mean, it's not even it's an excuse that cannot even be allowed. And it's not about work hours and alone. I mean, there are people. You could work 12 hours a day, and that doesn't mean you can't have alternative interests and passions. So I would definitely say nobody should ever use lack of time as an excuse whatsoever. And it's important to have interests and passions in life. And frankly, it could be something that you do as a professional. That's perfectly fine. I mean, that's a great marriage of both personal and professional, and that makes you that much more dedicated to it. But what I meant is that it's about how do you connect to people. It's as simple as that. You connect to people at a different level. at an emotional level, and it comes with having something to say, something to participate in, beyond what you do at work. I'd say like many things. I like reading a lot of books. So the whole the reading aspect of everything. I hike a lot. And the hiking angle was a bunch of guys. I travel a fair bit too. So there's I have a fair bit of passions in life, and that I and try and pursue to the extent I can.
VINOD again for his very interesting talk and dialogue afterwards. And can I ask fellow banker, the president of the IIT Madras Alumni Association, Gopi, to give him this comment?
Thank you. So thank you very much once again. Thank you, Professor, for inviting me. Again, I plan to spend some time in the campus. Happy to continue chatting in a more informal setting in the hostel.